of some. It was a different film, but the point is that like everyone, and then it gets like thrown into this heap of like 6,000 reviews for that movie, and then because you're not like a verified critic.
Yeah.
And then I was looking through all the user reviews, and everyone just does like one sentence and then a star or whatever, and it's like 3,000 people doing that, and then my eccentric, rant somewhere in there that no one will ever see. So like
great.
it's sort of strange.
Depressing.
Like it doesn't really count for anything. Your reviews. It's not like Goodreads or something. There's no upvoting.
Yeah, there's a running tally.
There's no commenting and upvoting, and there's no way to keep track of that stuff.
That's too bad.
So what are we gonna do? Let's do Banshees, and then we can trail off into True Grit, the two True Grit films, because I kind of saw them, and I kind of didn't love them.
Yeah. Well,
I realize I just don't like the plot. That's the problem.
Yeah. I saw the first one a few weeks ago, but I haven't seen the newer one for years.
Yeah, well, the plot is just not good in True Grit, and I've always wanted to avoid talking about these, watching them and discussing them, breaking them down, because they're so bad to me. Even though they have everything going for them, I just hate the plot in True Grit, and so I would much rather have done like the Magnificent Seven, which is not even that good. It was like a B movie. I would much rather have done the Magnificent Seven and then the remake, which is even more. It's like a C movie, but for whatever reason, True Grit's like a classic, and you know what? It's like a late addition to the Western cinema canon, because it's like a '69 film.
Yeah, I know.
So it doesn't even really qualify.
You get that.
And it's John Wayne is like really aged in it, and he's Rooster Coburn or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll save that till the end of this. For now, we're going to talk about Banshees, which is a more contemporary film, and I think it should have gotten Best Picture, but that's just me. It definitely got Best Actor, I think. Oh, no, it didn't even get Best Actor, honestly. The Whale guy got Best Actor.
Yeah.
Did you think Colin Farrell should have gotten Best Actor?
See the black-haired guy?
Yeah, he's Porrig or whatever.
He's, Padraig or whatever. He's the cloying, kind of needy,
he's
guy.
The cloyingly nice, like needy friend. He's the main character, but he just doesn't really seem like it.
Yeah,
he's sort of subdued as a
it sounds
personality.
Weird, but like, I don't. Something about it sounds. This is not a good criticism of an actor, but something about him doesn't seem like plausible to me. I don't know why. Like, he seems like a character on Friends almost, just like the way his face looks. I don't know. I don't know what that is. He doesn't. I get that it's kind of a
character
comedy.
On Friends. Yeah, he has a kind of soft, well cornered look. He seems sort of soft around the edges and sort of tame. I said subdued earlier. He kind of he doesn't really look like a fully formed personality.
He just doesn't look.
That's the point, I think.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, this is kind of getting ahead of myself. But like, I kind of just feel a bit anal about historical accuracy sometimes, or at least like I want to work to at least appear historically accurate, sort of. And I just got the sense that was not the main point of the movie, but it kind of like annoyed me because it always seemed like they were about to really dig into the the reality of that time, whatever it was like, because even back, it's not that far in the past, but absolutely everything was totally different, or a lot of things were really different, I don't know. I have kind of a weird nostalgia problem. So I just, again, like he doesn't seem like a guy you'd find on a small island at that time in Ireland. And so that kind of takes me out of it. The sort of older guy is a bit closer, the surly, like, artist type. He's a bit closer, but that's pretty, it's almost like gay, just focusing on what guys look like, but it's not really.
Well, let's not disparage the homosexual community.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I just mean gay in the sense of like.
This is a professionally syndicated format here. Okay.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot you were gay.
What?
Excuse me.
Why? No, I'm saying
No, I'm just kidding.
This is
I
the
just
second time in like 2 days someone has like just kind of called me gay on like a call. I'm not sure. I think it's the LA thing. Maybe because I'm going to LA, they just decided that I'm going to go to West Hollywood and be
you one of
one
the
of the
glam.
boys, one of the lowdowns. What do they call it? What do they call it when like black dudes are gay and they just don't admit it? I think it's called down low. That's what they call it.
So funny.
And then
Okay.
maybe I'll get I'll date rape someone, a twink, and they'll die, and then because of the drug overdose that I forced them to go through, and then I'll have to go to prison, and then I'll get turned out in prison, and I'll become a girl, and then I'll be not only gay but I'll be trans too. So,
Dang.
yeah.
How the cookie crumbles. Well,
No,
anyway, I'm sorry for
well,
lowering
Banshees.
the whole tone.
I like Banshees because the main character does have my name,
Yeah, that in itself, that will
but it's
do
an
it.
Irish version. It's like the original or whatever. So
Yeah,
it's kind of you never. And by
it's
the way,
good.
96% tomato meter critic. Sorry,
Yeah,
review.
dude,
Very good.
I don't know why. Yeah, I don't trust that at all, man. Like, especially in
You didn't
recent
like this
years.
movie? You didn't like this movie?
No, I actually kind of didn't. It
Well, I'll
was
tell you
it.
one thing. The Colm character,
Yeah.
I didn't like it when I first tried to watch it, some months ago. And
Yeah.
then, I think like a professor or someone, a professor in my screenwriting class told me he liked it. And I was
Yeah.
like, all right, well, this guy likes it. Maybe he's seeing something. I'm not seeing in it. And
Yeah.
eventually I got back into the swing of watching these sort of buddy bromance films. And it's not really a bromance film.
Now
I
it's kind
think
of an
that was
anti-bromance film,
it's
isn't it?
anti-bromance up until kind of the end, and then it's just like a little like sneak peek of what portends for the two of them, which really wasn't probably that worth documenting. So,
Yeah.
you didn't see the full thing though. That's my
No,
turn.
I did. I saw the full thing.
So you saw like how it ends and how
Yeah.
it kind of crescendos into all this chaos and
Yeah, violence and fire
cacophony and
and
of the fire. Okay, so you know about the arson.
yep,
Spoiler: there's some arson involved.
yep.
Um,
And at first you think, wow, maybe this guy is just so stubborn that he's going to literally die in a fire because the other guy's so annoying. But he doesn't. He's either too cowardly or whatever. And so he doesn't have a house, but now Colm is Padraig is forcing Colm to be his friend. And
Parig.
Pareg.
They don't pronounce the D.
Pareg.
It's like
Porridge.
it's not Padrig or Podrig or whatever. It's like Porgrig. And this is the thing is that I feel like he's sympathetic for this offbeat reason, which is because he has his donkey and
Yeah.
his job is sort of lame, but he dutifully he's like always waking up at the crack of dawn to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know, like he's just got this sort of humble working class existence, and yet
Yeah.
there's something sort of luxurious about his station in life. He sort of has this island privilege where he can kind of like, and he kind of doesn't have to do anything, but he kind of seems to choose to. It's sort of Sisyphean, he's pushing the rock up the hill and then it rolls back down, and
yeah. Because the island is so inconsequential and remote that just to eke out a living that literally no one cares about, you're really at the last, you're at the end of your rope basically. But he still does it with a cheerful attitude.
And
Yeah,
as
you could.
Brendan Gleeson's character sort of exposes, Inshirin doesn't have Banshees, right? It was just a flight of fancy when he named his music composition, and so even that is sort of like renders the setting more bleak. But this is the thing. I think Porig is smart because he's able to sort of make a map of meaning out of his Sisyphean labor. Like he sort of like it's like I saw a cartoon last night where a guy Sisyphus is condemned by Hades to roll the rock up the hill, and then it rolls back down and then rolls back up, and then eventually he just turns it into like a gym where he pays people to roll the rock up with him, and it becomes like this sort of like he becomes kind of like a stud, and he's got like women going to the gym and stuff. So like he's making money, right? It's just kind of like in that movie Dodgeball with Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
He sort of becomes like he's like this dweeb, and then he becomes a muscle, like a bodybuilder.
Yeah, from
He
zero to
becomes a
hero.
winner. Yeah, and so Poirier is kind of in that boat. Like he does the same mundane job day after day, and yet for some reason he's gaining something out of it. But Colm doesn't see that. Brendan Gleeson's character doesn't understand that,
Yeah.
and so that's why he kind of wants a divorce from the friendship or whatever, and focus on something a little more obvious, which is in this case classical music.
Yeah.
And he of course he cuts off his fingers. Another spoiler. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's maybe what you didn't like was the sort of like desperation.
Yeah, that's well, exactly. Yeah, I just feel like that kind of lowered it from being an actual, like what the movie, in my opinion, what the movie presents itself as is this like subdued, like quote, like literary, like highbrow art film, but this moment of cartoonish violence, not only does it not make any sense, like to me at all, and nor do I think it does it actually make sense, but it just kind of lowers the tone, and it makes it almost like it made me feel like I was kind of watching a cartoon, like, and yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really it has that pacing, doesn't it?
Well, yeah,
It's all of a sudden, it's really like over the top. You feel like the character there's poor judgment, even worse than you thought he had. Yeah, and it
yeah.
seems like it was just sort of flash in the pan kind of
Well,
action
yeah,
that reflected sort of like an appeal to the immaturity of the audience,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
But I think that's sort of what was you might have a superior temperament to a lot of people, but I felt like the movie was trying to make meaning out of the sort of the doldrums of this relationship and trying to make
Yeah,
it seem like something that wasn't entirely staid and pointless and redundant. And it accomplishes that, but it does have it has a sort of animation effect where it's like a jump scare almost, like it's
yeah,
sort of it's a cheap thrill and
yeah,
a cheap trick even. And
yeah.
I do understand your concern, but I also think that what would the alternative be for you? Like that they would have like a chess match, and then he'd find out that Porig was really good at chess, and then he would like he beca- like I mean that's this isn't Henry James, you have to actually have some sort of cataclysm to make
Yeah,
it to make it a Hollywood film.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Is it? I mean, is it a Hollywood film?
Well, it kind of styles itself like it isn't, but it ultimately is because
Okay, and I guess that's what kind of maybe that's what kind of annoys me. I don't know. But
yeah, there's something kind of insincere about the whole like, oh, we're just humble Irish playwrights,
yeah.
trying to make a quick buck on a pot boiler on the West End, and we'll do anything, we'll write about anyone's lives as long as it rings true. And it's like it's a
Oh
little.
my gosh, that's so funny. Oh
And I
man.
think what it is it's sort of like the last gasp of like white supremacy in Hollywood,
Jeez.
where they're kind of like, oh yeah, well we'll make a movie just for white people, and they make a kind of a retarded movie about retarded, redneck white people,
Yeah.
but no one's really hip to that except for people that maybe a little bit more like what do you call it? What do you call it? No one's like the people that understand that Ireland isn't that big of a deal.
Huh.
Like Ireland's not that impressive of a place, right? At least I don't think so.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking that I was thinking that like in a different context, I think about an hour ago, like I feel like there's kind of a dumb American thing where people basically conflate Ireland with England, and they just think
Yeah,
like, "Oh, this
yeah.
old Irish gentleman, he's basically like, he's just an old English gentleman. There's no difference." It's
Yeah,
just
no,
it's this like
it's a strong difference. It's
yeah,
a strong difference.
it's just like, "Oh, they're cozy old comfy gents with smoking a pipe." Like it's this dumb aesthetic thing that sort of misses distinctive national characters and the totally.
I think Irish literature was like invented in like the 20th century. You know what I mean? Or it was invented by like Bram Stoker with Dracula in the
Yeah.
1897. It didn't really like have like a strong. I mean, there's other like Lord Dunsany. I mean, there's always like an antecedent in like in like the
Yeah, but I
literature of
mean,
the nation. I
Irish
think
is
like
not
its
their language.
heyday was literally like first of all, they're speaking like the language of the colonial oppressor, and
Yeah.
their heyday for their literary canon was when it was kind of like the peak of their colonial subjugation.
Huh.
And then ever since they got their freedom, they haven't really maintained that, and they haven't maintained the glory, and
Well,
that's
yeah.
fine. But
Well, yeah.
it's not like a cool story. Ireland is not like this like you know it's not like Scotland, which has like a little bit of like medieval sort of triumph embroiled in it.
Hmm.
Ireland is kind of like a loser country.
My opinion basically is that when you talk about white people a little bit before, I think there's this weird
No,
sense where
sorry,
like
being
Irish
glib.
people.
I was being kind of flip,
What's that?
I was being flip or glib or whatever.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but I think there was a sense. Everyone says like Irish and Italians only became white like in the early half of the 20th century or whatever.
William Butler Yeats said that
Yeah,
until the Battle of the Boyne, Ireland was part of Asia.
that's crazy. I wouldn't go that far, but that's weird. But no, I mean he'd know better than I would, right?
I just think it was a decidedly irrelevant country.
Yeah,
The England sort of was glad could play second fiddle to it.
yeah,
Um, so that it made England seem a little bit better. And
yeah.
England, to be fair, England at times was had questionable relevance, but it proved in quick enough measure to be a stronghold
Well, it's not to be a freaking world beater. I mean,
of medieval Christendom. But like, I don't think that Ireland. I mean, Ireland kind of preserved Christianity originally. Actually, that's kind of its
well, that's the
standout
thing. Like,
accomplishment.
if we look at if we zoom in or out, like it'll have its shining hour, but you have to go back like centuries, no doubt. Whereas Britain's shining hour
Well,
was
like you have to go
way
back
more
millennia.
recent. What?
You
Yeah,
have to go back millennia. Yeah, really. And
yeah. Well,
uh, the abbey. There was a famous abbey of Columba, I believe, that was established in Ireland, and
yeah,
those abbeys out there. They preserved illuminated manuscript, the most iconic of which is the Book of Kells, and
yeah,
those kind of like kept Christian theology and tradition and literature preserved in kind of a nutshell sort of civilization.
yeah.
But eventually the English like didn't abandon that style, and they actually changed up the style a lot deliberately because they didn't like the way the insular monks maintained their practice Christianity essentially. And
Yeah.
so the Anglo-Saxons sort of stripped it bare and just sort of upgraded and redressed it.
Huh.
So it didn't last that long. This sort of glory phase in Irish history.
Well, glory
Um,
phases never do.
but that was millennia ago. I mean, that's like what 1,500 plus years ago, right? About
Well,
1,500 years ago.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I think approximately.
And then ever since then, they've sort of been playing second fiddle to England. They were invaded
Yeah.
by the Vikings too, which isn't good because that means the pretty women get stolen and brought back to Sweden, and then
Yeah.
everyone who's left is kind of is second pickings. Um,
Jeez.
And yeah, I mean, but Ireland is interesting because it's a loser nation, but that's what makes it kind of interesting.
Hmm.
It's a high grade version of a loser country, and
Yeah, that makes sense.
which England can be in the moment as like in a spirit of irony, but Ireland I think is more fundamentally like that,
Yeah.
and that's what informs this film so much and makes it so appealing to the current generation of viewership because audiences will see this film or on Netflix or whatever, they'll see it and they'll be like, "Oh yes, this is what all white people are." This is sort of like this distillate. It's sort of this marinated whiteness. It's not like plain vanilla uncooked like barely cooked whiteness. It's marinated. It's seasoned. It's barrel aged whiteness, right? It's the kind of thing that is sort of you can condescend to, and that's why this film had so much success. Not really like the fucking dynamic between Coleman, um, Podrick, but
Tarek.
it was sort of what that culture represents to the modern audience, and unfortunately, like they drink like these dark beers. You'll notice this. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I
especially
actually
and
I
it's almost
actually
like
like that.
it's like this slightly hipster nod that they're doing, where they're trying to get you to appreciate that they don't just drink whiskey; they drink, brewery ale. Like every
No, that's not what that. No, they were drinking Guinness.
it
That's what they were
wasn't
doing.
Guinness. It wasn't actually Guinness. It was probably a homemade. Like it was probably a different stout
You
or
know,
porter or
I
whatever
think. I mean, this
dry
might be
stout.
anachronistic or whatever. I might just be totally wrong, but I really like Guinness. It's like my favorite quote beer or whatever.
Yeah, you also play like Coca-Cola too, and
Yeah,
Budweiser.
yeah,
So
exactly. But my point
and
is that
Marlboro
like
Red.
yeah, my point is that when watch and McDonald's, my point is that when watching that, I feel like I
All the red
heard
and yellow, yeah.
yeah all the basic default
Anything that makes
normal
your teeth
things.
yellow and looks red.
Yeah, black coffee in a red cup, red solo cup. Um, but I think I recall the bartender saying like Guinness. So I don't think it was like this.
Oh, it was actually like uttered.
I
Yeah,
I
well, that's
think so.
okay. That makes me like it like 10% less because the fact that
Hmm.
they were just on the nose drinking Guinness as if it were like never as if in like the 19 whatever like what time is this anyway?
I think it was 1910 approximately.
Yeah, like even as if 110 years ago they would only drink Guinness and that's all. Like, I mean, there's like Murphy's. There's other like even now there's like alternatives to Guinness that you can
Yeah.
import. But like I don't know.
Well, I know they've been brewing it for a long time, but I have no idea whether it was like this monoculture drink way back
That's what I'm
then.
saying. I think that kind of ruins some of the
But
veneer.
that's what I well that's kind of what I'm saying. Weirdly,
The
I don't
humble
really mind. I
facade of
don't
the
what?
film is sort of frayed for me because it's like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought they were like cooking that stuff in the basement,
Well,
and now I find
exactly,
out it was just like
exactly.
it's
See,
like commercial
yeah.
culture.
I mean, I don't think we really, or I certainly don't really know the details of 1910s like Irish islands and their life and culture. But I want the movie to do some interesting stuff, like two or three things that make me think like, oh wow, this is like, oh wow, oh of course they do it like that back then. Oh wow, the olden times are different, aren't they? And just the lack of that was that's what I was missing. That's and I think
Yeah,
you're
they
kind of picking,
didn't. They didn't really have a lot of gimmicks, and it was understated, or like unadorned. I think you would view it like as threadbare, but I viewed it more as like unadorned. They were trying to
yeah,
be not pretentious, and they wanted to be all stagey and make it
yeah,
look like you're watching in a playhouse with minimalist
yeah.
sets, low
Yeah,
budget
and that's a good point. I mean, like I said
dressing
before,
room.
like I alluded to before, I kind of have like a nostalgia fetish, which is probably not good for movies to pander to. Like the point, obviously, is not that it takes place in this time place. It's just a good story, and everything else is kind of superficial window dressing. So, yeah,
The window dressing is this is a weird film because it's sort of a film. It's like a there's a trace element of Beckett. It's got this
yeah,
waiting for Godot um um
it does. Yeah,
interaction, and it almost seems like if they drank a little more they would start to talk like the characters in that play as well.
yeah,
They would just sort of ramble and repeat the same sort of non-vocabulary. And
yeah,
this movie was kind of like it was kind of a pedestrian attempt at that. And I think it
yeah,
succeeded,
exactly.
but I don't think, I think it sort of seceded from the style as well.
Yeah, I agree.
It
Well, I
succeeded, but
because it's a contradiction in terms to make like a Hollywood Beckett. It's like you can't, the whole point.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely contradiction in terms. However, did you like the performances?
Um. Yeah, I think they were good. I mean, like I said, I kind of got hung up on what the actors looked like, but they're good acting. I mean, another little thing is I did feel sometimes the dialogue was anachronistic, and that kind of bothered me. And to contrast this, like the lighthouse, for example,
that's always a threat. Yeah.
In the lighthouse, the dialogue just is so. It sounds so freaking much like its time and place, and I really
Well, the
appreciate that
lighthouse,
little.
yeah, is a more faithful period
Yeah,
piece. And but the lighthouse is also a lot more gay. Like you were saying gay earlier.
yeah,
I
it
felt like
definitely
the
is. Yeah.
lighthouse had this homosexual sort of
Well,
overture
well,
or undertone or
yeah.
whatever
Well,
it was,
I
or
mean, not.
miasma.
Yeah,
And in
yeah.
this film, at least it was like sort of people were like, emotionally contained.
Well, it's about friendship, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean.
It's not about these weird Oedipal dynamics and their backfires or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in the lighthouse, what's Robert Pattinson is the younger one. Willem Dafoe is the
And
older
Willem
one.
Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe is sort of this gnarly guy with a funny accent that he never drops, and it's always very on point.
Yeah,
However, Willem Dafoe is kind of like low. I think he might have some sort of obsession. They're kind of obsessed with each other, and
yeah,
which is weird because not only do they cohabitate, but they actually do the same job. They do, and they have to do like dozens of different tasks every day. It seems like. Um, Whereas in this film, they don't cohabitate at all, and they don't really share the same profession.
yeah,
I think Cole might actually have been retired in that movie,
yeah. We
in
never really see
Banshees.
him doing anything. He just kind of lives in
But
his
don't you
hut.
understand that it's called the Banshees of Inshirin, and that means of Banshees of Ed Sheeran, and that means that the
Yeah.
he's using his imagination as a composer to bring renew vitality in his community. And so when there's this drama where he sets the house on fire and he cuts his hand, or even earlier when he cuts his
Well,
fingers
I think
off,
Pyrig sets the house on
isn't
fire.
that kind of like like they became the Banshees? They're embodying the Banshees. They're
I
inventing
yeah.
that. They're inventing it for the island. It's not
Mm,
like the Banshees uh, have ever existed anywhere, right? It's a fictional
yeah.
mythological construct, but it can be sort of reified by human endeavor. And
Yeah.
don't you think that that's kind of what the point of the movie was? A little was that they kind of engendered the Banshees themselves.
I do get that like Sisyphusian dynamic that like sometimes life is so boring you literally like have to cut your fingers off and set the house on fire and like just to have something to talk about just because like
Yeah.
geez it's like something at least something happened like I've actually felt that I feel like I felt that in life like quote
What did you? Well, I mean, we've all felt that. That's why it was a
well
relatable
exactly
picture.
yeah but I
However, why do you think the he
yeah
didn't want to be? I never understood why he just refused to talk to him at all.
well
Maybe
he says it basically he says that Pyrig is really boring and
sure.
he says that his life is short and he has an inkling in himself of greatness. Perhaps he's completely deluded, but maybe not. And he wants to foster that inkling, and so he can't waste time like talking with this idiot for like 4 hours a day. Like
Yeah,
I've
but
had that with some people where
why
like,
not just maintain distance and then limit the conversation? I mean, that's what anyone would do, right? It was just
well,
sort
that's
of be
the
like,
thing.
okay,
I would say, yeah. Why not just be like, I think the movie wants us to think like, oh, this guy just won't stop badgering Colm. But that's why the movie seemed kind of weak to me. Like you do you really have to resort to like mutilating yourself? Like
no, I think it's a modern like I think there are people in the modern times that are kind of like Colm, and yet in
yeah,
reality, like I don't know if they would ever go as far as Colm. And
yeah,
in 1910, I don't think Colm would have existed. But I think there are modern people that are just dumb enough that they would not really have a good strategy for this kind of thing, and they would
they
just end
wouldn't.
up
Yeah,
ghosting their friend. You know,
yeah, they wouldn't be able to like
they just ghost.
not.
They're not socially tactful, and so they
Yeah,
just end up ghosting people when they get like they perceive any slight or any inkling of disinterest or any
yeah,
threat of abandonment. They just sort of get or a threat of time waster, wastrelhood or whatever. So like, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there are a lot of people like I was kind of invited to go on a podcast and talk about uh
yeah.
friendship breakups where you break up with a friend and then agree to disagree and not talk to them. I was invited to go on a podcast and discuss that in certain instances and in my life, and those certain instances are what do you call it? Usually what happens is one of the friends just gets exceptionally impatient.
Yeah.
And like, because so I'll have friends where they're like we're like bitter enemies, we're frenemies, but we'll still maintain contact as a position of honor, right? As a
Damn,
position
that's
of
cool.
honoring the drama, let's say. But then you have friends that you don't really have that brewing
Yeah.
conflict all the time. But those friends are more likely to just sort of delete your phone number and then block it or whatever,
Yeah.
and ghost
Yeah.
you. And you kind of wonder about who maybe that they're just not good people, kind of.
Yeah.
And then you kind of have to just settle with that, not a good person.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to,
Low key a scumbag, right? And that's
Yeah.
where these sort of friendship breakups happen. They happen on moral grounds. They don't really happen on grounds of politics. They happen on grounds of really a moral failing on one person's part.
Damn. Yeah. No, dude. I could really speak a lot to. I could speak a lot to that because
You can't.
I've had a lot of quote. Well, they haven't been friend breakups, so I've basically done that thing. Of just sort of, well, not exactly ghosting people, but like really not wanting to talk to someone and sort of either just telling them that, which is always like freaky, or just and it's just bizarre, rejecting someone.
Can you say good things about this film? Because I know
Yeah,
you don't entirely hate it.
yeah.
And you know
Yeah.
that the director was a playwright for some period
Well,
before, right?
that's got cachet. Yeah, I mean, I think like you were saying earlier, there's a kind of economy to things, which is very. It sort of speaks to a playwright's sensibility, and it also it just makes there's kind of an elegance to that, and there are these little details that are sort of gratifying to notice, like that kid, that depressed kid, um, who's playing with that like stick or something.
And the one who kills himself,
Yeah, just like all the ambiguity around his.
Dominic,
Well, that's the thing. We don't even know if he killed himself or if he slipped, or if the witch pushed him. Those little
right?
details they build. They're very spare, but they build to a rhythm in a elegant, um, very elegant way. So I appreciate that.
And did you appreciate the island?
Yeah, and of course, although yeah, just the beauty of
Can I be honest with
Ireland.
you, man? Can I be honest with
Yeah,
you? Not to cut you off so much, but
it's
just
fine.
I wanted to say this.
Yeah,
The island's beautiful, sure, but I thought that his wife was I thought his sister was his wife. I
yeah,
didn't realize, and I didn't realize that he was kind of like this incel. I thought
yeah.
he had a boring marriage where he didn't want to have sex. I didn't think that he was an
That
incel.
quite that down low. Yeah,
Yeah, but then you find out that he just he lives with his sister, and they have this sort of odd sort of uh kind of love hate dynamic. Um,
yeah,
that's sort of secondary compared to the one between him and Colm. And then she leaves because she's
yeah,
also extremely displeased and bored.
yeah,
And I mean, they're all dissatisfied, but she seems like she had some smarts about it. And then
yeah. She's got to do something about it.
when she leaves,
Certainly.
it's the fulcrum point that sort of allows the well, it's the inflection point in the fulcrum that allows Colm and uh, Pyrig to
Yeah.
reconnoiter. But I think that that's also what kind of makes it a gayer kind of thing, like that the girl leaves,
Hmm.
and then that these two friends become closer in a bombastic sort of fashion, and of course it's her sister, it's his sister that leaves.
Yeah.
She's his sister, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. She's his sister. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that until the tail end of the film. So I thought that his wife leaves, and then he fills the void by hanging out with Colm again. So I thought it was a little kind of homo erotic or something, or homo
Well,
suggestive.
yeah. I mean,
And that's kind of the thing I didn't like about the movie because I didn't understand.
Yeah.
But it was also a misconstruction on my part, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
like that in modern films, I think. Like, there's a lot of sort of undertones of like, sexual failings and things in modern.
Yeah.
Like I was watching a TV show where the main character just like can't really get laid, but then he's
Yeah.
also like still the main character.
Yeah.
I've seen that. There's a couple shows like that and I think those shows they kind of seem to be more and more popular, and
Yeah.
I'm a little disturbed by it. And this movie is it's no exception to that trend.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Uh,
just statistically speaking, I feel like people are kind of lonelier and they're sort of shacking up less. So maybe that's reflected in films. I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of disturbing. Well, what's disturbing, I think, is this kind of anti-life atmosphere. It's kind of this like worship of
oh,
morbid things.
you're being really like.
I'm
Do
getting
you
the
think that's the problem? Is that it was like bleak?
No, I'm
What are you
not.
going?
I'm not talking about the movie. I'm not talking about the movie.
Okay. Well,
Just
you want
like
to move on to
the
True Grit? You want to move on to True Grit for contrast?
yeah, sure.
We agree that exceptional scenery in Banshees of Inshirin.
Yeah,
The acting is quite good.
yeah,
It's a well crafted film.
yeah,
It's a little too it's a little hermaphroditic in whether or not it's meant to be a play or meant to be on the West End, or whether or not it's a Broadway kind of deal, or
West End, but
whether or not it's
really cracked
a
me up.
Hollywood blockbuster. Like we don't really know what its purpose is. It's multi-purpose. One
Yeah,
size fits all, right?
yeah.
Um,
I will say, I agree with you that it was definitely a better contender for Best Picture
the Whale.
than Everything Everywhere All at Once. I haven't seen The Whale.
You should watch The Whale because that guy is actually gay in there. But then
Yeah,
again,
but that's the
he's
thing. Yeah,
explicitly gay, but then he's just a loner. So whereas implicitly gay and then he has friends. I don't know. The whole thing is too sexualized. I think these movies are so sexualized, and I think Everything Everywhere All at Once. The reason why people liked it perhaps was because it wasn't sexualized, despite
mm,
ostensibly being about a lesbian kind of relationship in the background.
yeah,
The movie was so kinetic and about mundane sort of action sequences that had no real logical value
yeah,
everything everywhere all at once appealed to people's sort of desire for materiality and
mm,
fun and
yeah. It's just sort of a
vivaciousness. It wasn't sort of this like psychoanalytic
yeah,
Oedipal trip.
yeah.
Although I think it would have been a better film if it were, right? I think that was
Yeah, I think
ultimately the failure.
yeah,
It was a giant
yeah.
music video.
I
And
agree.
Banshee should have gotten Best Picture, or at least maybe one of the Fentimans movie with the Spielberg one. I don't know,
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but
something more wholesome.
yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
Everything Everywhere all at once we're not going to even review because it was so
Yeah,
tedious and childish.
yeah,
Um, I didn't think the moral message in it was so mid or even
yeah,
subpar
yeah,
the film itself could never be good because the moral of the whole plot was really kind of atrocious,
yeah,
atrociously unoriginal. It was a
yeah,
hackneyed story. It was like, oh, this woman has to
yeah,
accept her daughter's emergent sexuality. Okay, who cares? We've seen a
yeah,
hundred things like that. It's a subplot in everything nowadays,
yeah,
or it has been for the last 30
yeah,
years. No one cares. But then
yeah,
they just dress it up with
yeah.
this sort of like Korean,
This pseudo
razzmatazz,
multiverse.
and there's a science fiction,
Yeah,
dopiness that they get into, and you're s- you're supposed to feel like edified somehow because it's science fiction.
yeah,
That's one of the rare movies I saw with my parents when I was visiting
yeah,
them.
yeah.
And I will say this: I only watched it because my dad told me it was a science fiction film, and then we
Oh
ended up
yeah,
seeing it in theater, the local Sequoia Theater in Mill Valley,
oh yeah,
and and I hated it because I knew instantly it wasn't really a science fiction film. It was
yeah.
some sort of like experimental music video that just
Ugh.
where the director never killed themselves, and they should have. And I think the movie had like 2 directors too. It was like a really oddly constructed project.
No, it was shot. I feel like a lot of movies these days are shot like they're shot like car commercials. They look like ads for Progressive. They have this
It looks like I mean, basically, Jamie Lee Curtis's character was like a sexed down version of Flo. Something definitely that. Like I was kind of halfway expecting Flo to just show up in that movie in the office as some sort of clerk, like in the newsroom or whatever it is,
the IRS offices,
the IRS, one of the accountants, or what's the one that mailroom, in the mailroom, but they don't have mail anymore. But
no, it's all paperless.
It's all anachronistic, really. Those offices, by the way, are like very anachronistic. That was the other thing about that movie, was that they were like they were playing into this sort of like 90s corporate nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly.
That just doesn't really like, sing true anymore. But I mean, it wasn't corporate, admittedly. It was
governmental, but that's basically the IRS is like the joke was this like Dilbert-esque like.
Yeah, it was Dilbert for stupid people. Anyway,
but it was even like cheesier. Okay, enough griping. Moving on.
Enough griping about the worst movie of the year. Yeah. Okay, we went from the best movie of the year to the worst movie of the year. Now let's talk about a movie that has nothing to do with any year.
Not even the year it was released in, ladies and gentlemen.
The 1969 True Grit, vis-a-vis the 2012 or what 2014 True Grit remake.
Yeah, I can't. Really
it was
after
2010, before 2015.
Okay.
And the True Grit remake is good. To be fair, it's fairly faithful in a lot of respects. It wasn't like a shit show, but it just had this problem where, like, I don't really like Jeff Bridges. I don't understand why he's playing a John Wayne role, the original John Wayne role. It didn't really see the overlap. Jeff Bridges is not like that scary of a guy, and admittedly, John Wayne isn't either. But John Wayne was never really portrayed as scary. But you could tell with the angles of the camera and the lighting and sort of even the dialogue language that they're trying to make Jeff Bridges sort of menacing or intimidating, at least in this remake. And it didn't work. They were missing the point. The point was that the guy isn't like this big old gruff guy who can kind of like. The point was that he was sort of like a questionable, like, kind of lovable loser character, and then he ends up being the hero. But in the remake, they make him seem almost like you already know he's going to be a strong character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And that's a subtle point. I mean, I've only seen the original, but I remember in the original he seems like. I mean, no, he does seem like he's pretty obviously a badass from the get-go. But he does seem, he seems kind of a mix between good and evil, maybe not that reliable, not that trustworthy. I mean, he's gonna be because it's back in the day, but I don't know.
Well, this is the thing: is that it was 2010.
Yeah.
And it was Coen Brothers, of course. I actually reviewed this film for my Coen Brothers tier ranking video that I did a few days, maybe earlier this week, a few days ago. I don't remember, but I did like literally like less than a week ago. And I said that this True Grit wasn't that bad of a film, and I still stand by it. It's not that bad of a film. It's just not excellent.
Yeah.
And there's way too many close-ups, which I admit is like we live in ADHD times. With the smartphones, with the apps, with the TikToks, we need people, the YouTube Shorts, all of that. We need people that can we need people to look at faces as intensely as possible, like overemphasize the faces, overempathize with the faces, and so they're doing all these close-ups. And I don't think it fits the vibe of a Western. I think Westerns, you have to appreciate scenery. The Coen Brothers are not very good when it comes to the Old West with the scenery. I know they've done it before with so I know they're doing it kind of consciously.
With Buster Scruggs, was that them?
That was later on, yeah, but that was them, yeah. But I'm thinking more stuff like maybe Miller's Crossing, or what's that one? Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That was kind of one that was more scenic.
Yeah.
This movie is not that. It's not very scenic.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of like shots of like really good scenery, and they don't emphasize the scenery.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a wasted effort. It feels like it feels.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing this in theaters in 2010, and I remember having that exact a problem with it even then. So it's
Yeah.
not me. It's 10 years ago I thought the same thing
Yeah.
that I think now.
Well, I mean, you could be wrong both times. I don't think you are though. Yeah, I
I don't
believe
think
it.
I would be wrong after 10 years. I think I would have been able to reevaluate
Oh,
it.
you'd be able to step back and kind of take
Yeah,
another
just
look.
after that length of time, of course. And
Yeah.
this it have some modification to it, and I have no modification to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see how you would want to focus on it sometimes, focus on the close-up sometimes, like Paul Thomas Anderson does it. It's usually effective,
Yeah.
but with when you're doing a western, it seems like you're avoiding the nature, which is kind of the whole premise of enjoying
Yeah.
a western
It,
film,
it
a
really,
western film.
yeah, it
What
really
makes it
is.
enjoyable?
Sorry to keep interrupting. Yeah, I think you're completely right. The whole.
Josh Brolin also is not a convincing villain.
Mhm.
He's too likable. I noticed that every time he plays a bad guy, it doesn't work. He's just a little too likable.
That's pretty
Um,
funny.
and I don't remember what Matt Damon was doing. I don't think it was that special.
Yeah.
Matt Damon is in a lot of stuff, and he's a welcome appearance.
Yeah.
But he's basically a glorified cameo in this movie,
Jeez.
from what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
The original, though, I mean, the original is also got some similar problems. The
Hmm.
difference with the original is that the girl character is less physical,
Yeah.
but she's a lot more bratty. Whereas
Hmm.
this girl, it doesn't really is really bad with her word choice. Like she's not eloquent. She doesn't talk a lot, and she isn't she's not charismatic, but she's kind of more physically involved, and that's sort of how she carries her weight.
Oh yeah.
In the original, the girl was a lot more of a personality, and I kind of don't know which one I would prefer really, but I think you have to kind of lean towards personality at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
do,
No, I agree. I think personality is definitely bigger than physicality. Physicality is fun, but it's not it doesn't win. It doesn't beat it. I think. I don't know. I haven't seen both movies though. I've only seen the old one. I can
oh,
only
you
speak.
haven't seen? Well, you saw the original a long time, the remake a long time ago.
Yeah, I did, but it was a long time ago.
But it still counts, dude. You don't say you haven't seen it. You've still
Oh,
seen it.
sorry. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was so long, I may as well have. But yeah, I barely.
Well,
I don't remember it.
what they did in the original, which is kind of neat, is that they introduced she needs to do this whole errand, and she needs the marshal to help her. And so she asks who should where can I find the marshal? And the guy's like, well, there's three different marshals, and he names them, and he's like, this guy is the best, this guy is the fastest, and then this guy's like the meanest.
Oh
And she's
yeah.
like, okay, I'll go with the meanest one.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice little touch, then.
But what it really is, it's like it's a reference to the good, bad, and the ugly. It's the
Oh.
same sort of concept, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Um, and Marguerite Roberts that's the writer.
Hmm.
Kim Darby was the woman's name. Glenn Kim. Yeah, and she's more androgynous in the first one, surprisingly.
Yeah, I noticed that. It was kind of interesting, but I guess that's I don't know. It makes sense, I suppose. I don't want to go harping on time again, but
He got his best actor's Oscar for the original.
John Wayne.
John Wayne did. It was I think his only Oscar for acting.
Who?
John Wayne got his best
Oh,
actor's
jeez.
award.
Wow.
He got the golden statue. Yeah.
Hmm.
And do you think he deserved it for this film in particular, or do you think it was more of like an acknowledgement of his career?
I don't know if it's either. I mean, when I saw it, the acting was good. The script was pretty interesting, pretty dramatic. The stakes were always going higher and higher. John Wayne was a likable hero. He was charismatic. He was interesting. But I don't know. I mean, I hate to say, I'm not really. I don't really notice stellar acting that often. And the weird thing is, if it's really good, you kind of don't notice it. Right? I mean, I know
That's also true.
it's kind of a cliche, but
it's easy to take great acting for granted. And the
yeah.
other thing is that you probably don't watch this from the lens of 1969.
Yeah.
Which I think it was. Yeah. In 1969, that kind of character wasn't really that like so much of a trope as it is now. Sort of this like kind of lovable loser clown hero.
Yeah.
That kind of that's a little bit more of a trope now because you got all these
Yeah.
buddy cop films, and you have these sort of what do they call them when there's like a big celebrity cast?
I
Um,
don't know.
they have
A-lister thing.
they have these movies where they have like a cast of where it's like six different A-listers
Yeah.
in like Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, right?
Yeah.
They or have like a Mission Impossible where they'll have like a team and like everyone on the team is pretty famous. Like
Yeah.
the Avengers does this too.
Yeah.
So like you have a lot of movies now where it's like a star-studded cast. I think that's the term.
Yeah. That's it.
Star-studded, but they also have another term. I can't remember. Ensemble cast. That's the
Mm.
other term. They have these ensemble casts and where there's like a lovable loser who's like really physical. But in '69, that kind of character existed in a lot of comedy films. But in a movie that wasn't like a comedy, I don't know if it would have been like as much of a character that as a lead character.
Yeah.
So this was really kind of focusing on like the frailty of man with this film.
Mm.
And that's why he got the Oscars because he was a kind of this frail hero
Mm.
that was doubtable, dubious, right? You could really doubt his proclivity for like getting the job
Mm.
done. And there's something Shakespearean about that, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's like it's very human. But in westerns, that wasn't extreme. That wasn't always like like if you look at we talked about Liberty Valance before. When he plays Tom in Liberty Valance, he's way less questionable, right? He's kind of like a paragon of virtue.
Yeah.
In this one, he's not a paragon of virtue. He's precisely the opposite, and that's exactly why he's so sympathetic. And when he does succeed, you kind of swell up with more emotion because of it.
Mm. Yeah. Because he's more. It's just more realistic or something, kind of.
It's more of a victory.
Yeah.
It's a stronger victory.
Yeah.
It's more punctuated, and whereas um, I think in the remake of True Grit, I think Jeff Bridges is already typecasted as that guy.
Yeah.
So, like with the Big Lebowski, famously, or there's
Yeah.
a show now called The Old Man, but that's now.
Yeah.
Back then, he was known for other things like Big Lebowski, where he was like this loser that ends up saving the day, despite himself,
Yeah.
despite the odds, you know. But John Wayne wasn't typecasted as that
Yeah.
person, so for him to play that role was sort of humbling.
Yeah.
And I think people sympathize with the character more given that wider context. So yeah, in light of that, do you think he deserves the Oscar because of sort of the change in direction?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, what you're talking about it sounds like a good casting choice and a good like writing choice, but like I don't know if the actor deserves credit for being in the right place at the right time. I mean, I don't want to be like a stingy, but that's the
I don't
weird.
think. Do you not appreciate acting? I feel like there's more to goes into acting than you might be considering.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But I think like I didn't I didn't notice his fidelity to that like uncommon kind of persona, or his like how much he lived up to it. It didn't really stand out for me. And like you're saying, I don't really appreciate the full historical context, nor like what he kind of represented before he took this role and how it changed him. So yeah, I mean, it didn't. I think you're probably right. I just didn't really notice it. It's been about a month or so since I saw the movie, so I might just have just forgotten. But I mean, I think you did a
But
good job.
do you so okay, so in light of
Yeah,
a well qualified, decent performance,
yeah.
do you think John Wayne's shootout at the end was classic, or do you
Ye-
think the Jeff Bridges one was probably just as worthwhile?
well, I remember. I mean, even though it was more recent, I remember being kind of like I remember being impressed by that shootout. It really seemed exciting. It really seemed like just kind of like interesting and just cool. It was just great. It was really good.
Yeah, you're dead on. I think when I saw it in 2010,
Yeah,
I remember watching that shootout, and despite it being Jeff Bridges kind of awkwardly doing it, I sort of was like, this is why this movie was remade.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it was because of this scene. I remember thinking that, like, because I think my parents told me that, oh, this movie's a remake of a classic Western. I'm like, all right,
That's
whatever.
very perceptive.
And then I watched it, and I'm like, okay, this is why this movie's remade, because of this scene. Because everything else in the movie was like, it was sort of felt like filler added upon filler with a little bit more filler here and there. It was all like sort of unnecessary. I mean, you could kind of just boil it down to that one scene, but that wouldn't be a movie, would it? But that's just kind of how the drama felt. Like it didn't really.
Yeah.
It was a little too back ended. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I agree actually. I mean, again though, I'm talking about the '69 version.
They both have that problem, and that's why I was saying before at the beginning of the podcast, I don't really want to talk about these movies because I don't really like the plot. The plot to either film, remake or original, is not my favorite plot for a Western.
Yeah.
Probably for any kind of movie. Like it reminds me a little too much of Taken, those cheesy Liam Neeson films that just sort of came and went. It reminds me of there's like what 4 or 5 of them now. I don't know. It reminds me of that. It's like this girl is sort of helpless and foolish, and then this sort of drunken buffoon has to kind of like show her the ropes and like inevitably save her life. I feel like that was what is this like a surrogate for fatherhood? Like what's the message? I think the message was a little too mixed up in maybe the politics from the 60s. It filmed like there's like the failure of man was kind of a theme. But it works when it works, but it doesn't work very often. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more fixated on I think we were talking about with the pacing, or I don't even know if you call it the pacing, but just the way the movie is structured, such that like it's pretty boring until the end, where it's like awesome, but then it's just like you said, like it took way too long to get to that point, and it was just a bunch of like bickering in the wilderness and like bells clanking on horses and just these tedious arguments. And yeah, I think you have a point there too. I mean, I think.
Oh yeah, well you see that a lot in westerns. That there's arguments between two guys on horse about where they're going to ride, or one guy's on the horse, he's yelling at some guy who's not on the horse for being too slow, or he didn't set up camp quickly, or he didn't cook enough coffee for the crew. Like there's always like arguments in these westerns, and you really have the only other genre that does this to the point where it's like nauseating is noir films. And you see this in comedies a lot too, but in comedies I think it's more like expected.
Yeah,
wide eyes open.
You
eyes
don't
wide
really
open.
care about what's happening in a comedy as long as it's funny. Like they could be doing any boring old thing. You don't really care. Like,
Well, they're really kind of sexing up the argument in comedies to make them lighter, daintier, and more kind of more memorable because they have this crisp humor added. Whereas when it's
you just started to sound kind of weird. I just missed the last like 2 seconds of what you said. Can you talk again? Sorry. I gotta hang up and call back. Hold up. You there? Dang, I can't hear it all now. Hello? Nah, it's a different kind of messed up. I don't know what's going on. I can barely. It's so garbled and weird. I can try calling you from my computer, but I do think the problem. What? I think the problem might be on your end, but I will try calling you from my computer, and we will see what happens. Hold up.
classic. He makes pleasure. I think you have Cinephiles, like 6 or something. Writing, that's not metal. Then you have to, because that's one of the scenes in like, motion picture history. Where like, I just plot is starting easy, and the other one is reminds me of perhaps how TV is the special stuff is on less. I love the whole Western hobbies, sort of marathon film, classic American sort of. That's really excellent film. Music combines visual scenery, combines action, combines sound music. I always said it was best music. So I called it. Last week, the best music and combined with the pacing. The pacing. The combination pacing and music without that brief that. Last week is transformed because it's set up so many people with insignificant and the actual climax of the film is more interesting for and then he's a lot more interesting for act but like but it isn't for act what we should be in one expression or another. And last week has that problem. True Grit, both original and remake cases has that problem as well. Just breaks it out. Not really set up. Boring. Second half, so so right. Let me see if I can. Right. Things out. I don't. We'll wrap up pretty soon. So the camera, yeah, Henry Cavill is director. I feel like that's why the cinematography sucked in the original one. But the Cole brothers directed the second one, and that's even stranger than the people sucked. They were pretty good. The fire was before them, right? Or else it. So I guess we can as closing notes. We can go to everything I wrote. Because I haven't showed that to you. Yeah, this movie is really good craftsmanship for a motion picture, undeniable. I do kind of like that a short round actor was in this, although I didn't even know it was him, frankly, until the award ceremonies, and then they all kind of the Hollywood Reporter starts blabbing about how he couldn't get a role for like 20 years, and you just sort of like don't. It goes in through in one ear out the other, kind of like who cares. But then I saw an interview with him, and he seemed kind of chill for a guy that hadn't had to work in 20 years. But he also seemed kind of crazy. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that like that particular short round actor. He's also in the Goonies as a kid. He's a child star. I'm not convinced that he like made this film any better. There he is, right there. I'm not convinced that he helped the movie that much. He was kind of a weak character actor, and I think if they had someone else, maybe the film would have been more enjoyable for me. And again, I didn't even know he was Short Round or the character from the Goonies. I just didn't think he was very good at it. And the irony is, he got his best supporting male supporting actor award, right? Best supporting actor award. He got that, and at the Academy Awards, just sort of like it just seemed like a fucking booby prize kind of. I'm not a big fan of Daniels, and this movie was directed by two guys named Daniel, and it was written by those same two guys named Daniel. I'm not really crazy about it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and then you had this thing where the daughters are lesbians. And of course, Jenny Slate is probably not a lesbian. She was on Saturday Night Live, and I don't know. I just suspect she isn't, or Stephanie Sue or whatever. But they had this weird thing where they're like trying to like give them like leather jackets and they're hanging out in bars talking about lesbian stuff. And I'm like, what's the angle? Like, are you trying to like promote lesbianism? Like, I just didn't understand. I mean, they want you to think that like it's like, oh, this is what they were born as or something. And the mom's played by Michelle Yeoh. The mom was like none the wiser, and then only when they were adults did she find out, and she couldn't accept it. That's the whole movie. But I think it's like, aren't you using all these sound effects and visual effects to like, distract us from the reality that maybe she could have just had better tact about the way she dealt with her daughter? Like, I mean, she didn't have to like go from like, denying the sexuality of her daughter to like full on embracing it. She could have found some kind of middle ground, surely. But this movie sort of skirts around that because it has all these weird, physics quandary scenes and sort of dance montages, and then of course there's like Jamie Lee Curtis is trying to kill Michelle Yeoh the entire time, and she's always this like shape shifting monster. And the whole thing is very psychological, but it's like, which is what it was, which is what it did well, was it conveyed inner psychology quite well, and like some of the better music videos that are out there in you know 2020 whatever. But I just felt like there was a inherent stupidity on the part of Michelle Yeoh's character, whose name was Evelyn Wong. There is an inherent stupidity that they never really addressed, and I think that the fact that they didn't address it is a sign that we are living in troubled times a little. Like, couldn't you just tell her to do what to do? She couldn't find like the natural course of action. She had to like have a psychotic break where she thought she was a shape shifting, time demon. Surely that doesn't happen to every single person who has to confront some sort of difference in her daughter's sexuality. So and I know that they're playing into the traditional, immigrant kind of mindset. But even then, I think that's sort of a cheap, as a scapegoat, and a little insulting to immigrant communities. Although, to be fair, there are probably people more like that in immigrant communities than naturalized ones. But I don't think it was as extreme as they made it seem in this film. Or only in the more extreme cases, I would guess, but not uniformly. So this film, for what it's worth, was just sort of it was a slice of life film, but it was one that was like extremely psychological and extremely sort of testosterone driven for like the psychologism in the film. It had a lot of sort of if ands or buts. Um, I mean, that's how it appeared to me. Like it seemed like a very unusual circumstance. That was sort of dressed up to be, a generalizable experience. But for me, it felt like a very unusual circumstance that anyone with so some stupid and it's a but the fact is because there's a lot more. I don't think it's the best picture. Like, best visuals. That's easy. Probably best music. Best acting. Maybe for maybe the best actress. Beyond that, it felt flat. It felt flat. And so I think Banshees could win awards. Obviously, still respect the film. Critics loved it. Audiences liked it. It's a memorable film. Maybe memorable because it takes place in a less than usual locale. But this film aside, well, Danny and I talked about this True Grit, original and remake. Have we plots like but there were all
execution. Many layers, only problems in cinematography. So we have poor plot mixed with crap cinematography. Here are films that feel like wobbling throughout. You're never the end of basically. Really playing the entire. Okay. Well, I wish I wrote in this podcast. But alas, I have no such rule. I'll just end the screen recording. And 110 minutes, or sorry, hour and 10 minutes, 70 minutes. As if you call it a wrap. Next time on this podcast, Cinephiles is the name. It's a memory truth project where, depending on how you came about this, it could be a project of a fun project. But it's a probably solving a project progress. Yeah, this is Cinephiles podcast, and I co-host certified I guess. Lost signal. I'm not sure where to say. It has to be true. So this days. Yeah. Next up on this podcast is going to be maybe some useful films to be able to watch. Probably watch as well as the 70s, and then watch Hit right to the 80s. Because already Unforgiven just remake was the 90s directorial masterpiece. But then there's other 80s. There's supposed to be real comedy western guys qualify those from the discussions on Western cinema because they're really subject matter that just I don't want to pretty waters by sort of mentioning often. However, quickly before that, he made a from the early 70s called I think I had a different name. It was his first directorial debut as a filmmaker in the Western genre. I don't know what his sense became in the season. Like Carl Frazzle scrambled these days. It was his directorial debut in the Western genre.
Let's look what it is, and then we can end the pod for good. Cry Macho. I kind of want to see that. Just as or the Mule or whatever these recent films were. I'm not a big fan of his directorial style. I never really have been, but I respect his prolificness. He's made, and he's also a Bay Area native, and it shows up, I think, in his personal style as an artist, a film artist. He also can compose for some of these films, so he's a well-rounded creative guy, as you would expect for a 90-year-old genius, 92-year-old genius. Mystic River, I didn't know he did that one. I have to watch that. Blood Work, I might have to watch that too. Invictus is kind of whatever. Gran Torino is interesting. Changeling, Letters from Geo, Flags Are Flies. Great concepts, boring plots, boring execution. True Crime, never saw that one. Bridges of Madison County. Unforgiven. Eventually I'll do a tier ranking for all of these Clint Eastwood films. Heartbreak Ridge. That one might be kind of curious. Pale Rider, Sudden Impact. Oh yeah, well obviously the Dirty Harry ones are a lot of fun. High Plains Drifter. So he did. This is his first real directorial production in the Western genre. And 1973, High Plains Drifter, Clint Eastwood, Verna Bloom, Mariana Hill. And then he did 3 years later. It got 94 right away, so pretty good. 3 years later, he did another Western, his sophomore Western, called The Outlaw Josie Wales, which I'll also have to kind of watch in full. And that stars Clint Eastwood, Chief Dan George, and Sandra Locke. I believe this one actually has relatively sophisticated portrayals of Native Americans for the time, especially, but also just overall. It has some, nuanced portrayals on Native Americans in the Wild West. Honky Tonk Man, Firefox. One of these, Bronco Billy, was a comedy. I might watch clips from that because it could really well round the perspective on these movies, on these Clint Eastwood westerns, these Clint Eastwood directed westerns. So I'll watch clips from Bronco Billy and maybe even any other thing in Clint Eastwood because eventually I'm going to do a tier ranking and I'll have to kind of see everything. He's made a lot of films. I think Steven Spielberg, and Woody Allen have made so many movies that you kind of have to turn your brain to mush just to watch everything they've done. Scorsese's also quite like that. I think Scorsese has the benefit of being a more driven, masculine artist. Eastwood's a little, soupy with his masculinity, and it shows in the movies he directs. Woody Allen it's a lot of good dialogue, but the acting and the camera work is usually kind of hit or miss. I mean, sometimes he gets a really good DP like Gordon Willis, but often he just abandons that kind of craft altogether, and he's just sort of like he's walking through sort of video play. So it's excellent writing. He's got excellent writing. And if you one of the only writer directors that can really have that distinction. Martin Scorsese gets close to that, but he doesn't always write everything. And then beyond Woody Allen, Martin Scorsese, you have Steven Spielberg, who I don't really understand his sort of category. I think he does a lot of science fiction. He has got a lot of history, and he kind of blurs the line between both. Sometimes he has a little too much science fiction perspective on historical events, like a war horse or weekend or whatever. And it gets AI, gets ET, and I think it was called the he has some stuff. I really want to see Bicycle, where it is young, inimitable, is inimitable, 35 million. But it was some Model 8, Super 8, that's it. So I'm going to watch this Spielberg one soon. So, yeah, 2011. Be like healthy. How can I be? Healthy anything. So I feel watch some like lesser, less than appreciated Spielberg films to understand a little bit more about his authorship. I think there is and because my browser does not respond, and that's what his best. So, separate flags, we can find them. And we're beyond that at this point. This is how long. Anyway, any further ado, wait around, fellas. Because we can. How do I pause this? Where's the pause button? Pretty soon. Back pretty soon. It may have built memories of classic blockbusters to be 80%. Assuming greatness, those maybe that and that. Just there. Yeah, just such as this is J.J. Abrams and scenes over. So it's interesting combination between those two geniuses. So and this. Yeah, I mean, try to add a little dimension to these reviews. I don't want to feel like I'm only focusing on films. So I kind of watch some like,
dramas. Carrie Met Sally, took a lot of some with the great, some slice of life films. Some lesser flicks by really famous directors have sort of been passed over in the Criterion collections. So I feel like films are like the odds and ends of the last 40, 50 years. Things that you wouldn't really want to watch.
But just for completion's sake, you end up watching. I guess that's the nice way to put it. All right, an hour and 20. That's as much as I can do. Good night and good luck.